The giant space station called Galactic Council Station Omega was buzzing with activity. Inside the main meeting hall, something terrible was happening. A strange alien creature named Commander Veltar stood in front of hundreds of other aliens from different worlds. He had 4 arms that were shaking with fear, and above his head, scary pictures were floating in the air, showing his home planet on fire. Veltar's voice came through a special machine that turned his weird clicking sounds into words everyone could understand. Please, honored council members, you have to help us. The evil Korthok Empire has sent thousands of warships to attack our world. They're burning our cities to the ground. But that's not the worst part. They're stealing our children to sell them as slaves in their markets. The main leader of the council, Speaker Rindle, looked like a giant squid with many arms. His tentacles were moving around wildly because he was so upset. I wish we could help you right now, but we have a big problem. Our 4th fleet is already fighting another war with the hegemony. Our 7th fleet is busy protecting the trade routes where our merchant ships travel. We just don't have any ships left to send. Another alien delegate named Thalngik suddenly spoke up. Wait a minute. What about those new guys? The humans from that small planet called Earth, or Southrias, we call it in space. Didn't they just figure out how to travel faster than light? When he said this, many of the aliens in the room started laughing. It wasn't nice laughter. It was the kind of mean laughter you hear when bullies are making fun of someone. Speaker Rindle's voice was full of disgust when he replied, Are you serious? Those humans are barely out of the Stone Age compared to us. They only just learned how to contain antimatter without blowing themselves up. What could those primitive creatures possibly do against the mighty Korthok Empire? But Veltar wasn't laughing. His voice became very quiet and sad. They might be primitive, but they're the only ones who aren't busy fighting somewhere else. While we sit here and argue about how backward they are, my people are dying. Every minute we waste, more of my friends and family are being killed or taken as slaves. The council couldn't argue with that. They had no choice but to send out an emergency message on all the communication channels that connected the different worlds. The message was simple but desperate. Emergency help needed right now. The planet Zelani Prime is under attack. Any ships that can fight, please come immediately. Far away from the council station, floating in the darkness of space, there was a human military ship called the Leviathan. It was the command ship for something called the United Defense Force, or UDF for short. On the bridge of this ship, Admiral Jack Morrison was staring at his computer screens. Strange alien writing was scrolling across the displays, and he was trying to figure out what it meant. Morrison was an older man with gray hair and lines on his face that showed he had been through many battles. He had spent his whole life protecting Earth and the colonies that humans had built on other planets. Now he was looking at something he had never seen before, a cry for help from aliens he had never met. His communications officer, Lisa Rodriguez, was a smart young woman who was really good with computers and alien languages. She looked up from her workstation with a worried expression. Admiral Morrison, sir, I just got a message from Earth Command. The big bosses back home want to know if we're really thinking about getting involved in this alien war. They're asking if we're seriously considering helping these creatures we don't even know. Morrison's face became very serious, like a father who just heard that someone was hurting his children. Rodriguez, I want you to get on the radio right now. Contact every single human ship in this part of space. Tell them to get ready for battle. He stopped talking for a moment and looked back at the images of the burning alien cities on his screen. And Rodriguez, get me a direct communication line to President Carter back on Earth. I need to talk to him right now. The wait felt like forever, but it was actually less than an hour before the answer came back from Earth. The message was short, but clear. You have permission to do whatever you think is right, Jack. Use all the military power you need. Just make sure you bring our people home safely. This was the moment that would change everything. The aliens in the galaxy thought humans were too weak and stupid to matter. They were about to learn how wrong they were. When humans hear someone crying for help, especially when children are in danger, something happens inside them that other species don't understand. They don't ask if it's profitable or safe or easy. They just ask one simple question: how fast? Can we get there? Morrison stood up from his captain's chair and looked around at his crew. Every man and woman on that bridge knew they were about to make history. They were about to show the galaxy what humans do when innocent people need help. When Admiral Morrison's call for help went out across all of human space, something amazing happened. Around Earth, the giant shipyards that float in orbit started working like crazy. These huge factories where humans build spaceships suddenly had workers running around everywhere, welding metal, loading supplies, and getting ships ready for war. It was like someone had kicked over an anthill, but instead of ants, it was humans getting ready to save some aliens they had never even met. Within just 12 hours, something incredible was happening at Luna Station, the big space dock near Earth's moon. Ships were arriving from everywhere, and it was becoming the biggest fleet that humanity had ever put together. Captain Mike Davis stood on the bridge of his heavy cruiser, called the Gettysburg, and he couldn't believe what he was seeing through his windows. Sure, there were lots of military ships showing up, the kind with big guns and thick armor that were built for fighting. But that wasn't the crazy part. The crazy part was all the other ships that were coming to help. There were huge cargo ships that normally carried things like food and computers between planets. These ships had been quickly changed to carry weapons and soldiers instead of washing machines and birthday presents. There were even passenger cruise ships that usually took rich people on fancy vacations to see the rings of Saturn. Now these luxury ships had been turned into floating hospitals and troop carriers. Workers had ripped out the swimming pools and restaurants and put in medical equipment and bunks for soldiers. The most unbelievable thing Mike Davis saw was a private yacht called the Sovereign. This fancy ship used to belong to a rich tech company owner named Amanda Wells. She was so rich that her personal spaceship had its own tennis court, where she could play sports while flying between planets. But when she heard about the alien children being taken as slaves, she told her engineers to rip out that tennis court and put in torpedo tubes instead. Now her party boat was ready to shoot missiles at the bad guys. Commander Rebecca Blake was Morrison's assistant, and she was getting more and more worried as she watched all these civilian ships arriving. "Admiral, this is completely crazy. Look at these ships. Half of them don't even have proper weapons. Most of them have never been in a real battle. We're going to get these people killed." But Morrison just pointed at his computer screen that showed all the ships in the area. "Rebecca, look at this. You see that big cargo ship called the Big Rig? That's captained by Tom Bradley. He used to drive trucks on Earth's highways before he became a space trucker. Somehow, in the last 12 hours, he managed to get military-grade shield generators installed on his cargo ship. I don't know how he did it, but now his truck can survive a space battle." Morrison pointed to another ship on the screen. "And see that cruise ship, the Pacific Dream? Captain Robert Chen took out all the passenger cabins and put in 2 full companies of Marines. Plus, he somehow fit an entire field hospital in there. These people might not be professional soldiers, but they're not stupid either." In the main briefing room of Luna Station, Dr. Jennifer Hayes was giving a very important lesson to all the ship captains who had volunteered for this mission. Dr. Hayes was Earth's top expert on alien biology, which means she studied how alien bodies work. She was talking to hundreds of ship captains through hologram technology, so her image appeared on screens all over the fleet. "Listen carefully, everyone," Dr. Hayes said in her teacher voice. "The aliens we're going to help are called design. Their bodies are made of silicon instead of carbon, like us humans. But here's the important part for your medical teams. They bleed something that's very similar to the copper-based blood that some Earth animals have. So if you see blue-green blood coming out of a wounded Solani, your medics can treat it almost exactly like human blood loss. Stop the bleeding, replace the fluids, and keep them warm. When Dr. Hayes finished her lesson, Admiral Morrison stepped forward to address all the captains. The room got completely quiet because everyone knew this was the moment when everything would become real. "Ladies and gentlemen," Morrison said, looking around the room at faces both young and old, military people and civilians who had never fired a shot in anger. "The aliens out there in the galaxy think we humans are too primitive to matter. They think we're too stupid and too weak to make a difference in their big, important wars. Today, we're going to show them what humanity really does when someone calls for help. We don't ask if it's profitable. We don't ask if it's easy. We don't ask if it's safe. We just ask one question. How fast can we get there?" Morrison's voice got stronger and more determined. "Lock and load, people. We've got some alien children to save. And we're going to show these Korthok bullies what happens when you mess with innocent kids while humans are watching." Just 18 hours after they first received that desperate cry for help, the human armada jumped into hyperspace. 18 hours from hearing about the problem to having hundreds of ships racing across the galaxy to help. This speed of response would become legendary throughout the galaxy, and other alien species would talk about it for thousands of years. They would tell stories about the day when the primitive humans showed everyone what real heroes look like. Around the beautiful planet Solani Prime, the evil Korthok warships were floating in space like hungry vultures waiting to eat a dead animal. These big black ships looked scary and mean, and every few minutes they would shoot down at the planet, destroying buildings and killing innocent people. The Korthok were not just trying to win a war, they were trying to completely destroy everything the Zilani had built. On the biggest Korthok ship, Admiral Gorthok was sitting in his fancy command chair, like a king on his throne. He was watching his ships slowly tear apart the planet below, and he seemed to be enjoying every minute of it. Gorthok looked like a giant bug with huge jaws that could probably bite a person in half. He was the kind of evil creature who liked to watch others suffer. Suddenly, one of his workers called out from across the bridge, "Admiral, sir, we're picking up movement at the edge of the star system. Something big is coming." Gorthok's bug mouth parts clicked together in what might have been laughter. "Oh, so the Galactic Council finally decided to send someone to help these pathetic How cute. Tell me, how many ships are they sending? 5? 10? The worker at the sensors looked confused and kept staring at his screen. Sir, I'm trying to count them now. 200 ships. No, wait. 300. Sir, they just keep appearing out of nowhere. More and more ships keep showing up. On the main viewing screen at the front of the Korthok ship, something incredible was happening. Human ships were popping out of hyperspace, one after another, like popcorn in a microwave. But here's the thing that really surprised Gorthak. These ships weren't just randomly flying around, like most alien fleets do. They were moving together in perfect formation, like they had been practicing this exact move for months and months. Back on the human command ship Leviathan, Admiral Morrison was standing calmly on his bridge, looking at all the information about the enemy. He wasn't panicking or getting excited. He was just studying the situation like a chess master, planning his next 10 moves. "Attention all gun crews," Morrison said into his microphone. "I want you to target those big platforms that are shooting down at the planet. Blow them up first." Then he switched to another channel. "All civilian ships, I want you to form a protective circle around the planet and get ready to pick up refugees. Marines, it's time to get in your drop pods. You're going down to the surface." Colonel James Murphy was the leader of the 3rd Marine Expeditionary Force, which is a fancy name for a bunch of the toughest human soldiers in the galaxy. When he heard Morrison's orders, he got a big smile on his face. As his drop pods were being shot down toward the planet like bullets from a gun, he talked to his Marines over the radio. You heard the Admiral. Devil dogs. It's time to show these bug-faced bullies what happens when you mess with innocent kids while the Marines are watching. The Korthok had conquered dozens of planets before, and they always fought the same way. Most alien species in the galaxy fight very predictably. They line up their big ships and shoot at each other until one side gives up. It's like two armies from ancient times meeting on a battlefield and just charging straight at each other. But humans don't fight like that. Instead of keeping all their ships together in one big group, the human fleet suddenly broke apart into dozens of smaller groups. Each group had maybe 10 or 15 ships, and they started attacking from different directions all at the same time. It was like instead of one big punch, the humans were throwing 50 smaller punches from every possible angle. Captain Lisa Wong was commanding a fast attack ship called the Hornet, and she was leading her small group of ships in the kind of attack that should have been suicide. They flew straight at the enemy ships at incredible speed, fired all their weapons, and then turned around and flew away before the enemy could shoot back. Against any normal enemy, this would have been crazy and stupid. But it worked because the Korthok had never seen anyone fight like angry bees before. Down on the planet's surface, the real magic was happening. Marine Lieutenant David Park and his squad were moving through the ruins of what used to be Zelani City 7. Their special armor had technology that made them almost invisible, like chameleons that change color to match their surroundings. They were sneaking through the rubble and destroyed buildings, looking for enemy soldiers to eliminate. Contact at 2 o'clock. David whispered into his radio so quietly that even someone standing next to him might not have heard it. I see a Korthok patrol. 6 bad guys. What happened next was something that no alien in the galaxy had ever seen before. The fight lasted exactly 14 seconds, and when it was over, all 6 Korthok soldiers were dead. But here's the incredible part: the humans never fired a single shot. They didn't use their guns or their grenades or any of their high-tech weapons. You see, the galaxy was about to learn something very important about humans. On Earth, humans aren't the biggest or strongest or fastest animals. They don't have claws or fangs or poison or thick armor like other creatures. But humans became the rulers of their planet anyway, and there's a very good reason for that. Humans are incredibly smart about turning everything around them into weapons. A rock becomes a hammer, a stick becomes a spear. Even their bare hands become deadly when they know how to use them properly. The Korthok soldiers never knew what hit them. One moment, they were walking through the ruins, feeling confident and strong, and the next moment, they were being attacked by invisible enemies who seemed to be everywhere at once. The humans moved like ghosts, struck like lightning, and disappeared. Like smoke. That this was just the beginning. The galaxy was about to discover that when humans go to war, they don't just fight with their weapons, they fight with their brains, their creativity, and most importantly, their refusal to give up when innocent people need help. Communications Officer Rodriguez was staring at her computer screen, and her hands were shaking with anger. Her voice was tight and controlled, like someone trying very hard not to scream. Admiral Morrison, sir, we're getting a message from the main Korthok ship. You're not going to like what this monster has to say. The main viewing screen on the bridge flickered to life, and suddenly everyone was looking at the most disgusting face they had ever seen. Admiral Gorthak appeared on screen, and he looked like a giant cockroach that had learned how to stand up and wear clothes. His bug-like face was twisted into what might have been a smile, but on his alien features it just looked evil and cruel. Unknown vessels, Gorthok said in a voice that sounded like metal scraping against metal. I am Admiral Gorthok, of the mighty Korthok Empire. You pathetic creatures need to turn around and fly away right now, or I'm going to do something terrible. I have 10,000 Zelani prisoners down on the planet, including thousands of children. If you don't leave immediately, I will execute every single one of them while you watch. Their blood will be on your hands. When Gorthak said those words, something changed in the air on Morrison's ship. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees, and everyone on the bridge felt their blood turn cold. Morrison's face didn't change at all. He still looked calm and professional. But everyone who knew him could see that behind his eyes, something dangerous was waking up. Morrison spoke very quietly into his microphone, but his words carried to every single human ship in the fleet. Open a communication channel to all ships in the fleet. This is Admiral Morrison. Authorization code, Broken Arrow. When those two words, Broken Arrow, went out over the radio, something incredible happened across the entire human fleet. Captains who had been joking with their crews suddenly got deadly serious. Soldiers who had never been in a real battle felt their hearts start pounding. Every single human in space knew exactly what Broken Arrow meant, even if they had never heard it used in a real war before. It meant that the enemy had just crossed a line that should never be crossed. It meant that the gloves were coming off. It meant that humanity was about to show the galaxy what happens when you threaten to hurt children while humans are watching. Captain Susan Taylor was commanding a special kind of ship called a stealth frigate named the Ghost. When she received Morrison's Broken Arrow order, she smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. It was the kind of smile that a wolf makes when it sees a rabbit. Engage cloaking systems, she told her crew. We're going hunting. The Ghost disappeared from all sensors, becoming completely invisible to the Korthok ships. It was like the ship had just vanished into thin air. But 20 minutes later, something impossible was happening on the Korthok flagship. Captain Taylor and her Special Forces team were walking through the enemy ship's corridors, moving like deadly shadows. They had somehow gotten aboard the enemy ship without anyone noticing. And now they were moving toward the command center with the silent efficiency of Earth's most elite warriors. Meanwhile, on a converted cargo ship called the Data Stream, a computer expert named Alex Johnson was sitting at his workstation doing something that would make the Korthok wish they had never threatened those children. Alex was a hacker, which means he was really good at breaking into computer systems. He was busy introducing the Korthok computer networks to something called a logic bomb, a special kind of computer virus that would make their systems crash and fail within just a few hours. Half of the Korthok fleet was dealing with computer problems that were getting worse and worse. Their weapons wouldn't fire properly. Their engines kept shutting down. Their communication systems were filled with static. It was like their own ships were turning against them. Down on the planet's surface, the Korthok soldiers who were guarding the Zalani prisoners were about to learn why humans had become the most dangerous predators on their home planet. Staff Sergeant Maria Gonzalez and her Marine squad had spent 6 long hours crawling through rubble, broken sewers, and bombed-out buildings to reach the prison compound where the aliens were keeping 10,000 innocent civilians. Maria was lying in the dirt outside the prison, looking through her binoculars at the guards. She whispered into her radio so quietly that her own Marines had to strain to hear her. Remember, everyone, we're not just soldiers today, we're liberators. Those are innocent families in there, including children who are scared and crying for their parents. We're going to get them out of there, and we're going to make sure these Korthok bullies never hurt anyone again. The assault on the prison camp lasted exactly 4 minutes. When it was over, 10,000 Zalani civilians were free and safe. The Korthok guards, who had been terrorizing them, were no longer a threat to anyone. The human Marines had moved like ghosts, struck like lightning, and shown the galaxy why humans had conquered every environment on their home planet, despite having no natural weapons like claws or fangs, back in space. Admiral Gorthak was watching, his mighty fleet falling apart around him, and he couldn't understand what was happening. These stubborn humans refused to fight, like civilized species were supposed to fight. Instead of lining up their ships and having a proper battle, they were doing things that no one had ever seen before. His ships were being invaded by invisible enemies. His computers were crashing for no reason. His ground forces were sending panicked reports about ghost-like human soldiers who appeared out of nowhere, completed their missions, and vanished. Like smoke, Gorthok's voice was shaking with fear when he whispered to himself, "Who are these creatures? What kind of monsters have we awakened?" But he was about to find out, because at that very moment, Captain Taylor and her team were standing right outside his command center door. Exactly 72 hours after the human fleet had first appeared at Zelani Prime, something that had never happened in galactic history occurred. The mighty Gorthok Empire, which had conquered dozens of worlds and enslaved millions of beings, officially surrendered to a species they had never even heard of. A week earlier, Admiral Gorthok was now sitting in a small detention cell aboard the human command ship Leviathan. The once proud alien commander, who had terrorized entire star systems, was now staring at the metal walls of his prison, trying to understand how his unstoppable empire had been defeated by creatures he considered primitive savages. When Admiral Morrison came to interrogate him, Gorthok's voice was full of confusion and disbelief. "I don't understand any of this," the alien said, his bug-like features twisted with frustration. "Your species barely knows how to travel between stars. Your weapons are simple and crude compared to ours. Half of your ships look like they're held together with that sticky tape stuff you humans use to fix everything. How did you possibly defeat the greatest military force in the galaxy?" Morrison leaned back in his chair and looked at the defeated alien commander with something that might have been pity. "Gorthok, you made one very simple mistake. You hurt innocent people who called us for help. You threatened to kill children. That's something humans just can't ignore. What happened after the surrender was something the galaxy had never seen before. Instead of just going home and celebrating their victory, the humans did something that shocked everyone. They launched what became known as the largest prisoner liberation operation in galactic history. Human ships spread out across Gorthok space, systematically finding and freeing every single slave world the Empire had created. Captain Rebecca Johnson was now commanding a ship called the Mercy, which used to be the luxury cruise liner Pacific Dream before it was converted into a floating hospital. She and her medical crew were working 24 hours a day, treating wounded refugees from a dozen different alien species. Her sickbay was filled with beings she had never seen before, speaking languages she couldn't understand, but her human doctors and nurses worked tirelessly to heal everyone who needed help. The news of humanity's incredible victory spread across the galaxy faster than the speed of light itself. On every world, in every star system, beings were talking about the impossible thing that had just happened. A species that most aliens considered barely civilized had just defeated one of the most powerful empires in galactic history. Back on Council Station Omega, Speaker Rindle was discovering that the political situation had changed completely. The same aliens who had laughed at the idea of asking humans for help were now dealing with a very different reality. Delegate Thungik stood up in the council chamber with a long list of demands. "The human government is requesting immediate full membership in the Galactic Council," he announced. "They also want territorial protection agreements for 17 different minor species. And they're demanding that we create new anti-slavery enforcement protocols that apply to every member world." Speaker Rindle's tentacles writhed nervously. They can't just walk in here and start making demands. They can't simply dictate terms to the Galactic Council like they own the place. But even as he said those words, Rindle's voice didn't sound very confident. He knew that everything had changed. Commander Veltar, the Zelani representative whose desperate plea for help had started this whole incredible chain of events, slowly stood up to address the chamber. His forearms were no longer trembling with fear like they had been just a few days earlier. Now he stood with dignity and strength. "Honored Speaker Rindle," Veltar said in a calm, clear voice, "I think you misunderstand the situation. The humans aren't asking for these things. They're telling you what's going to happen next." The impact of humanity's victory was being felt throughout the entire galaxy. Aggressive empires that had been planning to attack their neighbors suddenly started having second thoughts. The hegemony, which had been at war with the Council for years, quietly recalled all of their border fleets and sent messages saying they wanted to discuss peace treaties. The Dominion, which hadn't talked to anyone diplomatically for centuries, suddenly opened communication channels and started asking about trade agreements. Meanwhile, back on Earth, President Carter was sitting in the Oval Office preparing to address not just the people of Earth, but beings throughout the galaxy who were watching and listening. His speech would be translated into hundreds of languages and broadcast to thousands of worlds. My fellow humans, and our new friends throughout the galaxy. President Carter began. Today humanity took its place among the stars, but not as conquerors or invaders. We took our place as protectors. When we heard a cry for help from people we had never met, speaking languages we had never heard, living on worlds we had never seen, we did what humans have always done when faced with injustice. We stood up and said, "Not on our watch." The president paused and looked directly into the camera, knowing that his words were being heard on alien worlds light years away. We didn't go to Zelani Prime because we wanted to prove how tough we were. We didn't go there because we wanted to gain territory or resources or power. We went there because children were in danger, and when children are in danger, humans answer the call. Throughout the galaxy, other species were learning something very important about the newcomers from the small blue planet called Earth. Yes, humans might be primitive compared to other galactic civilizations. Yes, they might be reckless and unpredictable. Yes, their spaceships might actually be held together with duct tape and determination. But none of that mattered when someone called for help. When humans hear a cry for distress, they don't ask if it's profitable to help. They don't ask if it's easy or safe or convenient. They don't ask if the people calling for help are the same species, or speak the same language, or worship the same gods. They just ask one simple question: how fast can we get there? And once humans decide to help, they don't give up. They don't retreat. They don't negotiate or compromise when innocent lives are at stake. They keep fighting until the job is done and everyone is safe. In the end, that was all the reputation humanity needed in the galaxy. They weren't the most advanced species, or the richest, or the most powerful, but they were the ones you called when you needed help, because everyone knew that humans would answer, and they wouldn't stop until everyone was safe. The galaxy would never be the same again.